This morning I'm in Cheyenne, Wyoming, visiting with Kathy Carlson, who is the Legal Review Administrator for the Office of the Wyoming Attorney General. Kathy, you are the former state law librarian here in Wyoming as well. It's our custom, Kathy, to begin by finding out a little bit about the person with whom I'm talking as a human being as opposed to just a colleague. Not that there's any real difference, but you get the picture. Could you tell us a little bit about your life, not only today, but perhaps even when you were younger?
Well, I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, and grew up primarily outside of Chicago in Arlington Heights.
Quite a difference in places, weather.
Weather, yep. And then we took a year out and lived outside Detroit for a year, and then I actually graduated high school in upstate New York in Watertown.
Uh-huh.
And then from Watertown, I went to Ohio State in Columbus and got a bachelor's in political science,
Mm-hmm.
and then moved across town to Capital University where I got my law degree.
Mm-hmm.
And took the Ohio bar, proved I could do it.
Wanted to be sure you could at least say you were a lawyer.
Say I was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then got a job with Lawyers Cooperative Publishing Company in Rochester, New York, straight out of law school. And worked there for 3 years, primarily on USCS. I did the case notes and ordered the case notes, put the schemes together as the replacement volumes were being put out. I also wrote case notes as the new cases came out. We were all assigned sections of the United States Code and read every case that the feds put out, both Fed Sub and Fed Reporter, on our sections of the code.
So you were using the competitors' books, huh?
Yeah, we were using the competitors' books.
Well, that was the thing to use, I guess.
That's the only thing that.
Sure.
But so yeah, we got every week we got the advance sheet, and we're working out of the advance sheet. And then, but they kept increasing the quotas we had to get in, and it just got to the point I was working 7 days a week to meet the quotas. And it's like, that's not. Can't do that for any length of time. So I left Lawyers Co-op and went back to school. It was to get my library degree, but it was quite interesting. I didn't know what I was going to do, but one of my colleagues had been a high school guidance counselor. And he looked at me and he says, well, why don't you become a law librarian? He says, you love to do research and you love working with the materials. That would be the perfect career path.
Had you ever even heard of law librarianship at that?
I hadn't even thought about it. I hadn't even
Uh-huh.
thought about it. But went back to school at the University of Iowa and got my library degree. And I got the MA. I didn't get it technically an MLS. I got an MA in Library and Information Science. And then graduated in December, which is one of the worst possible times to graduate, to be looking for a job, because most of the good jobs come around the annual meeting.
Yeah, sort of the summer when
Summer.
academic cycle, that's often when the hiring is done. And
So
yeah.
I did interview, including interview with like Alan Hollick when he was still at Villanova, but he was just ready to move to Ohio State, so they didn't hire for the position. So there were interesting things along the way. And I had a colleague from LCP who had left and had become a permanent clerk for a federal district judge down in Kentucky. And she got me a temporary appointment. It was about a 5-month appointment to handle one specific case that nobody down there wanted to handle. So I went in, handled it, and got out. And then got my job here. And,
So you basically didn't practice as such, but as a clerk you kind of did.
As a clerk I kind of did, yeah.
So that would be, it sounds like an interesting introduction to law librarianship and
Well,
your profession too.
Pretty good background with regard to how the books worked before I even started, because in writing and putting together the books, you know what the various binding tools are in them.
So you came here to Wyoming as the state law librarian, or
I actually,
assistant state law librarian?
I came out as the reference librarian.
the reference librarian, and that was around 1987. according
Came
to my
out
notes.
just about this time of year, October of '87. I was consider my start date as October 1st, even though I had a few days in September before.
So you're coming up on the big 30. Oh,
Next year will be 30 years with the state, yep.
yes. Some places you accrue special benefits if you're there a certain number of years, but 30 was the number where I worked. And
Well, ours is, when you hit 60 years old, you can retire,
okay.
and without having a reduction in benefits.
Well, that's nice. Yeah, we had to be there 30 years, and then we got full benefits, health benefits actually. Retirement was separate, and that vested years before, and was whatever it was.
Whatever it was, but
Yeah.
we have the rule of 85,
Mm.
but 60 is the magic number that the rule of 85 doesn't apply anymore.
Oh, very good. Well, before we start talking about what you do here at the state, not only then, but even now and in between, could I ask you if you have any particular hobbies or other passions that you occupy time with, and if the governor is listening or the attorney general, I'll say outside of work.
Outside of work. My husband and I love to travel,
Uh-huh.
and planning the trips is one of the things that we do a lot of outside of work, so that we can get the most of any place we go. We research what is available to see, and we've ended up in some interesting places that we wouldn't have if we hadn't done the research on it.
Yeah, you could miss a lot of the sights along the way, and I suppose if you don't really know that they're there.
Well, one of the big ones was stumbling across the fact that when the Queen is out at Balmoral in July and August, you could go inside Buckingham Palace.
So you've been inside the palace.
Been inside the palace.
Yeah, that is a real statement. My late wife and I got in there on one of those few weeks that we could do that.
But if you don't research it out, you don't know it's available.
That's right. Yeah, so you have actually traveled internationally,
we've been to some
domestically too, I assume?
I've been to all 50 states.
Okay.
So that was the start. And yeah, we decided early on, when we finally had, after getting all the student loans and had the money to actually travel.
Getting all the creditors all paid off.
Get the
when we were
creditors
students.
paid off.
Yes.
That we would take some of the more strenuous trips while we were young enough to enjoy it.
Sure.
So we've been to China with extensions to outer Mongolia, Ulaanbaatar, and staying in yurts in the Gobi. And the trip we took also included Tibet. So China, and then we've been to India, South Africa.
You really do get around.
And we've gone quite a bit of Europe, and next summer we're going to do Spain, Morocco, and Portugal.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that sounds like it'll be wonderful. Now it'll be warm down in that part of the country, continent. You said summer, so.
Yeah, well, it's right near our 30th wedding anniversary, but it also is, my husband loves to sing, and he got an opportunity to sing at the big fancy venue in Barcelona.
Oh.
And
at the Basilica? Or,
no, it's
the one
Plaza de Musica.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And I think that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
But he has an opportunity to sing there, so we kind of tied a trip to that. Found one that we liked, particularly wanting to go to Morocco.
Yeah. Well, you'll be right around the Mediterranean down there, so you enjoy that too.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. We'll be gone about 3 weeks, so
Sounds like you're going to have a great time. It sounds like you have a great time on all these trips.
Oh, we have had wonderful times.
That's good. Well, sort of now refocusing back on your career, you came here about almost 30 years ago,
Right.
another year would be that. as the assistant state law librarian, but sort of as the reference librarian, you said, or
Yep.
maybe that was the official title, I'm not
I
sure.
was called the reference librarian.
Okay. You want to talk about your years here in the state law library, and now more recently working with the Attorney
With the
General's
Attorney General?
office?
Well, I started out as the reference librarian, and I enjoyed that. I love working with the people. I love trying to help them find what they need to do to answer their questions.
Mhm.
I also did a number of bibliographies for one of the judges, which he appreciated. And about 1 year in, the state law librarian left, and I was appointed the interim, and I figured if I could do the job as an interim,
Survive.
if I could do the job as an interim, I should at least put in an application
Certainly.
to take it for real. And I think the biggest thing I did was bring the library out of the closet.
Mm.
It was kind of a hidden library. Nobody really knew it was there
Mhm.
and that it was open to the public. So I made sure I was active in the State Library Association so that I got to know the county librarians, and that not so much that I got to know them, but they got to know me,
Mhm.
so that they were not calling someone cold to try to get legal information or help for a patron.
So you were really the source to many of the county libraries, the county public libraries.
County public libraries.
Legal information that was needed from time to time.
Right, and so I developed that network, and it worked really well. And then, of course, once we got email and connections, the automatic connections, it worked even better.
Yeah.
But I also, the access to justice aspect was, although they had a nice library over at the penitentiary,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't know how to use it. So they would send questions over to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, you have that on site, we can't send it to you because you've got it sitting right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about 1989, I said I'd put my head in the news when I was talking to the education director, I said I would go over and do workshops with the inmates.
You teach them how to do
How to
a little
use-
bit more efficient work on their own.
Well, it worked real well because I could tell them what we couldn't do for them. So what would be a waste of time to even ask us. And what processes we set up a process where they were treated just like a county library with regard to interlibrary loan. That they borrowed books, we would pack them in a box and send them over, and they would use them and send them back, just like regular interlibrary loan. I always said they were like the 24th county library. Wyoming only has 23 states, but we treated them like the 24th county library. And I did that with the Penn, and I did it with the Women's Center, and I did it with the Honor Farm.
Okay.
But mostly with the Penn. And it saved a lot of work on this end because they wouldn't send things that, because I always felt I needed to respond to them and at least tell them, I can't do this for you.
Now, did you draw letters of inquiry from other penitentiaries perhaps through that? Because the word, I understand, does get around.
Word gets around, but I could only do in-state. So I would always respond and say, I can't, you'll have to check with your own state.
So in terms of law libraries, other than the university, you're the only other one in
There are only truly two in Wyoming. Two professionally staffed. I think there might be still out there a few little pockets of books that are maybe kept by a clerk of court, but there was only, there's a part-time staffer with the federal court, and supposedly that's open, but I don't think people go there very often.
What do the practicing bar people do? Do they work with the state law library? Or
We did a lot of Xerox and mail, and same like we did with the Penn. If they needed a book, it was boxed up and mailed out.
Okay.
And that's why we were a little slow to move, and actually totally skipped the CD-ROM generation, and a little slow to do electronic because that was restricted to library use because we couldn't buy a statewide license.
That's right.
Because it would been,
Yeah, they license electronic stuff, so you can't do what an owner can do, like you when you own the books.
yeah, we could mail a book.
Send it out to somebody.
But so we were a little slow
Mhm.
with some of the electronic things because it didn't work in our library. You know, we couldn't mail it. You know, you would get a treatise on CD and all the volumes were on the same CD. Well, we couldn't mail out a full set of books because we might need volume 2 here and they need volume 3. We still needed paper.
From what a lot of people have told me, some of that material in electronic format is really not very helpful to the user. They do find it in paper to be the best means.
Well, when you're dealing with a state this size and people who can't get to the library physically, I mean, we've got people we were serving 450, 500 miles away.
Yeah.
Being able to say, stick a book in a box and send it to them to let them use it, it was the only way it would work.
Mm-hmm. And the reporters, where things are a little shorter and you can get away with electronic, that had a downside. Your users were outside the building and you couldn't
get them.
Couldn't handle it that way. So
So
paper was the means.
Paper was the means. And I don't know whether we're still doing all that now or not, because I've been out now 4.5 years.
Yeah.
And what services they're offering. I kind of have stayed away because I don't want people to think I'm sticking my nose in where I don't belong.
I think that's the right role, the correct role for someone who's managed an operation and then has moved on, is let the new people do what you wanted to be able to do when you were there, which is take control of it yourself.
Yep.
Sure.
So I've been back to the courthouse to go to court, but I haven't been down to the library to see what they've done. I say I figure it's none of my business. And I haven't needed anything from them. That we're pretty much an electronic shop here, and it works for us. That when I moved over here, I kind of full circled a little bit because I act a lot as an editor. I review all of the documents before they are either filed or sent to, like an opinion letter sent to the agency that asked the question.
So you're back to dabbling in legal practice, sort of.
Sort of.
In a way, you've come full circle in that sense.
Yeah, full circle in that sense. It's interesting because government, it can be anything that comes across the desk, given that government deals in so many topical areas. It can be absolutely anything that will cross the desk. And it's funny to read something and work on it, and then later see that it's been filed and the newspapers picked it up. And then you read it and go, they got that totally wrong.
Oh.
They don't understand what we're doing. But
so you left the library in 2012 and came over here to the Attorney General's office.
To the Attorney General's office.
Now, was the library being reorganized or changed, or you just?
I just decided it was
time for a change.
Time for a change.
Well, that's a good reason.
And actually, this job, I'm the first person who's ever held it. It was designed, actually cooperative by the prior AG and the current AG. And when they found I was kind of looking to see, to find something different to do, the deputy AG was in my office within a day saying, we've got this idea for a job and you'd be perfect for it. And then we kind of negotiated to get me over.
Well, it probably keeps everything kind of fresh. I mean, after you've done the same thing for all those years, you've made your innovations, I suppose.
Well, my big innovation for Wyoming is I got the universal citation in. That's my contribution to Wyoming jurisprudence, was getting the court to adopt the universal citation.
Now, I know Wyoming is sort of perceived as a conservative state, and I assume the court is in many ways too, but at least you talked him into being progressive in the sense of citations.
I talked him into being progressive.
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a story that is not for publication that goes with that.
No, then we will not put it on this video. Just
but-
in case the Chief Justice sees it.
But no, it's one of the publishers would see it.
Oh.
But I had a lot of documentation to back myself up to go in and say, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
And the Chief Justice at the time saw exactly where I was coming from. And I mean, everybody was blindsided. He just signed the order and it was in.
Oh, that sounds like power.
But I had plenty of documentation. I had like a stack of documentation, and of course we weren't the first. And he saw the value of it. It was quite interesting though, some of the reactions of people when it first came in. You know, that till they started using the paragraph numbering and figuring out how easy it was to find something.
Well, they
when
were
you
used to the old
paragraph.
system where they parked it somewhere in the middle of a page, so you'd have to look and look for the item you wanted, but the paragraph gets it a lot easier.
Yeah, it makes it a
Find
lot easier. That once they figured that out, I don't think there's much griping anymore. When it first came in, there was
It's
a
a
little
matter
griping.
of getting used to the changes, I suppose. Yeah.
But that's my big contribution to Wyoming jurisprudence, I think, is getting that set up.
Good.
But we also had a project to go with it.
Oh, did you?
And that's part of the reason I say I can't do this project unless we have this. I was on the citation formats committee, AALL citations format committee, and ran into Greg Lambert
Oh, yes.
years ago, and actually worked with Greg because he was in Oklahoma at the time, and they were getting all of the Oklahoma cases retrospectively numbered so that and Oklahoma is still, I think, the only one that's done it, has their total case law online all the way back to the beginning with universal citation. And they were trying to get a beta tester, and we were the perfect state to be a beta test because we don't have a lot of cases. We don't have an appellate court. So all we have are the Supreme Court cases, which average, maybe 200 a year. So we were perfect size to try doing beta testing, but we needed to have that citation to be able to put the text in and do it.
So you just have the trial courts, and then appeals are directly to the Supreme Court.
Directly to Supreme.
Yeah.
Technically, that's what they say. There is a little bit of a skew that they can appeal from a circuit court to a district court, but that doesn't happen that often.
Well, that sounds like the system that used to be prevalent in just about all states, but as the number of cases got to be so large, the
They-
Supremes had to farm some of them out for review elsewhere.
But yeah, our Supremes average is somewhere around 165, 170 cases a year.
Well, that's a pretty good workload, actually, for a justice, but, it's demanding, but not overwhelming.
Yeah, I'll divide it by 5 because that's the total caseload.
Yeah, but they still have to
Like 30 to 40
agree on
days,
the
yeah.
decisions, and
Yeah.
at least enough of them to get a majority if possible, and set some precedent.
Somewhere between 30 and 40 cases per judge per year.
Well, we've sort of slightly moved into your professional involvement, but before we go there, I'd like to ask if there's anybody that you count as a mentor, or maybe more than one in your career.
Well, my true mentor was Carol Billings.
Oh,
Uh,
I noted your interest in universal citation.
Citation.
That was one of her real
Yeah, she
biggies.
never thought she would be, her 15 minutes of fame would be universal citation. But when I had I signed up for the AALL mentor program, and Carol was assigned to be my mentor. Of course, she had a state library, I had a state library, so we had a lot of things in common. And
Well, she's such a great person too. You must have done well with her as a mentor. She's so wonderful.
right,
Mhm.
and
Well, Kathy, you have, as I started to mention quite an impressive record of service to the profession. I mean, it starts here in Wyoming with the libraries, and I think they said you became secretary of that organization at some point along the way.
At some point, boy. A lot of times I have to go look at my own resume to figure out when I did what.
And you've been president of the Western Pacific Association of Law Libraries, the ALL's chapter for the western third or so of the country.
Twice.
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 Yes. And you've been chair of a number of committees and done other things. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of your professional service and maybe even add a little bit more as to why you consider this important enough to devote your efforts and time to doing?
Well, I started out, my first AALL assignment was the indexing to legal periodicals.
Mm-hmm.
And then a president of AALL named Pat Kehoe appointed me the chair of that committee.
Oh, that scoundrel. He's looking for good people, I think.
And so that was my first sticking my toe in the water committee, and I served on the citation format committee, and it's gone through a number of different changes. I'm not sure what it's currently called, but we worked on the citation format manual. I think it's a handbook. You know, there's a AALL citation form, so I had my fingers in that. I was responsible for coming up with the suggested citation for law reviews, which has never been adopted by anybody, but the selected law review citation. Marcia Kozlov was the driving force for that particular manual.
She was the state librarian in Wisconsin for many
at the
years.
time, yeah. And then I served at one point on the nominating committee, AALL nominating committee.
And we know where that ultimately went.
And then Margie Yaxman, Mays Axman at that time, I guess it's just Margie Mays now, put me on a task force, and I worked on the Fair Business Practice manual. I felt kind of out of place because there were only 3 appointees plus Bob Oakley, and it was Frank Hodak, Kay Todd, and me.
Well.
It's like, I'm with presidents, and how did you pick me?
Well, I figured you were going to be on the executive board sooner or later.
Sooner or
We better
later.
get you up to speed.
Yeah, because that was just before I went on the executive board.
So you served a term there from 2003 until 2006, I believe.
Yeah, and this was a 2002, because I know it was in Orlando when we met in 2002 in Orlando, so I know we were kicking that in 2002.
Yeah.
And then
You've also served a term as chair of the State Court and County Law Library's Special Interest Section.
and I also earlier on had been the secretary and treasurer of that.
Oh, so
that-
you worked your way up through the...
Worked my way up through the ranks there too.
Yes.
That was back in the 90s as well, I
Mhm.
did that. And
Well, now you mentioned last night, we had a marvelous dinner, your husband joined us, and you mentioned that you go to various law library meetings still, though you're sort of semi-retired from being a law librarian, or maybe that's the wrong term.
well, my title doesn't reflect the fact that I do a lot of what a firm law librarian would do in combination with what an academic law librarian
Okay,
would
so
do.
the Attorney General's office, being a working law office, your role is more to support, in a way, the firm libraries do.
The way the firm libraries do.
Mhm.
I am the go-to for citation questions. I'm the go-to if they've hit something in their research that they're having trouble with. And if you think about, I think about the editing portion that says, I'm like an academic librarian grading papers, except my papers have a little bit more importance than, they're not just academic
and you have to
exercises.
be nicer than a professor does to a student.
that it's the same type of review that somebody grading a paper would do. You're looking at the grammar, you're looking at the citations, have they cited it right? Is what they're citing saying what they're saying it's saying? I mean, it's all the things that an academic librarian teaching legal research and writing does with an exercise. Only these aren't exercises; these are real.
Well, better for the attorney to, when he or she gets out with that document, that they look good rather than looking like fools.
Well, and that's what we keep telling them is that we're not trying to be mean. What we're trying to do is make you look good. My name's not on it.
And incidentally, the state attorney general's office too.
Looks good. Yep.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that with the creation of this position, we're doing that. That the courts have seen a major improvement in the documents that have been filed, because we are catching the technical things that need to be caught. And if the argument isn't quite right, we're catching that too.
Well, I'm going a little off our planned script, but you just got back from the Western Pacific meeting, chapter meeting, and it was in Jackson Hole, I think.
Yep.
Northern part of your state.
Northern part of our state.
That's a bit of a journey from down here in the south.
Yeah, about 450 miles.
Yeah, states out here are a little bit bigger than the ones in the east.
Well, it was also interesting that we had a speaker who hadn't gotten there yet. It was still 2 hours before he was supposed to speak, and it was, the chair of the education committee was panicking and said, no, it's the SOP around here. Everybody in Wyoming knows that for meetings, you get up early, you drive to the meeting, you have the meeting, and you drive home. And it can be, we have a lot of meetings in Casper, which is about 180 miles north. You get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, drive to Casper for a 9 o'clock meeting, you meet till 3 and drive home. Everybody's just used to it. And he got there in plenty of time to give his presentation.
Yeah, worrying about all these cameras and stuff that I use for these interviews, and worrying that something will go wrong, which it fortunately doesn't as a rule. I can understand the chair of the education committee's nervousness.
But it's like, no, he'll get here. This is SOP.
Well, Kathy, we're probably nearing the end of today's conversation, but before we do, it's customary to ask if there's anything we've not talked about that you would like to mention. And not everybody has anything, so you don't have to come up with anything to pass the test.
Well, the only thing is we came to Cheyenne, and we figured we'd be here like 2 or 3 years and then move on. We've now been here 30. And it's because it's an easy town to get involved in. That, as well as all of the professional activities, I had a mayoral appointment for 6 years to the Board of Adjustment, which is the zoning, literally the zoning board, and served as the chair of the zoning board. And I also served on the Wyoming Girl Scout Council for 6 years. And I think, those are opportunities I don't know that if we had not been in Wyoming, we would have had the opportunity to do. Because most of those, we're not quite high enough on the ladder that those are normal appointments for. But here, we have all of the same organizations as a big city does, but fewer people that fill the positions. So we've done a lot of things community-wise that we would never have done in other spots too.
Well, that always sounds, I hear people that do things like that in our profession, or sometimes even get on city councils, and I don't know if anyone yet has been mayor, but maybe I just don't know of somebody.
But yeah, I served as the chair for 2 years too, so.
So you came here thinking maybe you'd move on to another place in a few years. I've heard that story time and again on these conversations. And then the next part is, and here I've been for X number of years.
Almost 30 years now.
Exactly.
And we keep looking, where would we like to retire? And we haven't found any place yet.
Well, last night I came in and it was extremely windy, which I understand does occur occasionally around here. And so if you want to retire someplace east, I think the wind would carry you there by itself,
Yeah.
at least for a short distance.
We always laugh, it snows and it disappears, and it's because it blows to Nebraska. It just.
Well, we're beginning to work into what will, in a few miles, become the Rocky Mountains in their complete form.
Their complete form.
But
Yeah.
it's a pretty area around here in the western, or I mean the eastern part of Wyoming and south
Oh, yeah.
section.
And, everybody thinks we're out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But Cheyenne is only 100 miles north of Denver.
And Denver is,
So,
last I checked, a pretty good sized city.
with anything you would want to do.
Exactly.
We thought we'd be going down there more often because for the arts, but there's plenty in Cheyenne.
Well, that sounds like a nice city in which to live. You're happy here.
Yeah.
So is your husband, apparently. That's the name of the
key.
game,
Yeah,
Kathy.
that's the name of the game.
Well, maybe on that note, I should thank you, Kathy Carlson, for taking time to put up with me this morning and let me come to your office here and talk to you on camera for our oral history of law librarianship and online. And in thanking you, I'm thanking you not just on my own behalf, but also on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodak, with whom you worked some years ago on a project for AALL, and Dick Spinelli, of course, our colleagues with whom I have the honor of working to put this oral history of who we are and what we did as a profession together. Thank you, Kathy.